we fear what we don't understand. And I'm a big science fiction reader as well. But I can say once you see the potential of how technology in this case can help you manage your facilities better, help you focus on the work that you find meaning in, fulfillment in, and doing your best work, I think there's such an opportunity to participate.
Today's episode features Noah Starr, founder and CEO of Tract IQ, a platform giving operators, brokers, and investors real data on more than 68,000 storage properties nationwide. Before launching Tract IQ, Noah built his own portfolio of 12 self-storage properties and underwrote billions in real estate transactions. We talk about how he differentiates from the REITs, his playbook for realistic forecasting and partnerships, and why treating management clients like true partners matters. We also explore how better data can change decision-making in self-storage and what he sees coming next for operators who want an edge. Let's jump in. Noah, thanks for joining us today. Really pumped to have you in the self-storage lab.
Great to be with you. Been a big fan of what you guys have been building for the last number of years and glad to come together onto this podcast. It should be a lot of fun.
And likewise, man, I'm really pumped to have you, first of all, and to definitely been keeping an eye out on you and the Tract IQ team, and you guys are everywhere. So that's really exciting to continue to see you guys grow and put some awesome stuff out there.
Yeah, thank you. It's a lot of fun. We have great partners and we're doing something that's never been done before at the SSA show here in a couple of weeks. So I'm excited to see you guys and it should be a lot of fun.
Nice. Are we going to get a sneak peek of what's behind the curtain today on the... I think this is probably going to publish after the SSA show, so we're not going to spoil anything.
Really? I think my partners would kill me if I spoiled the surprise too early. Okay. So I will refrain, but it's worthwhile to check us out for sure.
Okay. Nice.
Well, let's get it started. I always love starting with a bit of the early days. Can you take us back a little bit when you first started thinking about self-storage as something you can, build a whole career on? Because if I'm not mistaken, you're in on the corporate side of things, Wall Street before self-storage and even becoming your own, being an operator yourself. So can you start there and talk us through what happened?
Absolutely. So my first foray in self-storage was back in 2018 when I was on the institutional investment side, financed a handful of ground up CubeSmart and public storage construction projects, predominantly on the East Coast. And there I learned how resilient self-storage has been throughout cycles, how compelling of a thesis self-storage is to bet on American consumerism, American dynamism, and it made intuitive sense to me. I then moved from the debt to the equity side to work for a private equity company in the residential space. And back in April of 2022, I was super burnt out at my corporate job. I'd always wanted to be an entrepreneur since middle school. So I left my corporate job the same week that I got engaged to my now wife, same week that I bought my house, and the same week that I closed on my first self-storage facility outside of Houston. So definitely don't recommend throwing all your life events into 1 week. And there was a lot of planning that went into that, but that was what kickstarted my journey to initially build an investment company. So
just to cut in real quick, I had read that and listened to it on another podcast that you were on. And I'm just in order to go into the entrepreneurial game, you got to be crazy. But this man is insane. To try to, stack 3 humongous decisions in 1 week is just I don't know, you're asking for a lot of pain or something there. So
you said you planned this?
Yeah, I'll say it like this,
might as well.
Right? I'll say it like this. Right? When you want to get engaged, right, you don't just decide that day. Maybe some people do, right? But that was 9 months in the making, right? You got to ask the parents, you got to plan the site, you got to get the photographer. It's got to all culminate into one day. The same thing is true with finding that first self-storage facility. It was really a 9-month effort of underwriting, banging my head against the wall, sending in offers, right? It just happened to culminate in that 1 week, but there was a ton of planning that really went into it. And now it makes a great story. And, if it's all going to happen in one moment, I might as well just go all in.
The origin story has to be a good one regardless, right? So to your point, you got your superhero origin story, you got bit by the spider, and man, I'm like going down my Spider-Man analogy, and I forget the freaking female's name in Spider-Man, but you also found your
Mary Jane.
Mary Jane. I was gonna say Lois Lane, but I knew that's Superman, so I appreciate the assist there. That's awesome though, man.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and that was, my goal was to build an investment company in storage. So we acquired about 700,000 square feet of facilities across Texas, Tennessee, Arkansas, Michigan, and Ohio. We had institutional partners. And we did a combination of self-managed a handful of facilities. We hired third-party management companies. So I kind of ran the spectrum on the actual operating side as well, but ultimately had a really big challenge with data not being accurate, certain data sets that investors need, but I didn't have, and they were too expensive for me to get. So that kickstarted an effort to build our own tool internally. And we happened to stumble on Tract IQ on page 10 of Google. It was built in 2021 by a data company and a guy named Tom Hallaton. And right when they launched Tract IQ, Mr. Hallaton unfortunately passed away. So Tract IQ sat there kind of for 3 years.
Wow.
It had some customers. And when I saw the platform, I was blown away. And they said, hey, instead of licensing data from us, what if you just acquired Tract IQ? So we did that in March of last year, initially to bolster the investment company, but too many people wanted to sign up. So I publicly committed to no longer buying facilities in favor of building the best data company in the industry and adding value to operators and owners across the spectrum. So it's been an awesome journey the last number of years.
Man, what a wild story too, though. A turn of events there. And so you're still running your facilities, right?
Yeah, we've sold half of our portfolio. We were up to 12 facilities. We're now down to 7. And
Okay. I mean, that's still
the intent would
good
be
amount.
to exit over the next year from all of them, but still, every day I see the operation side of storage and the whole nine.
Yeah, that's awesome to have that also firsthand experience. And so I'm curious, like before we dive too much into Tract IQ, which we will for sure, in scaling that, I also think and research you're in your mid 20s when you
Just
started.
turned 30.
Just turned 30 whenever you start acquiring. Okay. But still pretty rapidly. I'm just kind of curious, in acquiring and scaling up and then going into acquiring a tech company. How did you balance scaling quickly? Was there a learning curve? Did you rely on mentors or any resources that kind of kept you going, or even systems or processes that you're had to set up to be able to balance all the moving parts?
Had some really wonderful mentors who would give me incredible guidance and wisdom, and highly encourage anyone listening to try to get mentors. And an example of a tip for, that one of my mentors of 6 years gave when I was buying one of my first facilities and trying to justify it for the bank and investors. He said, hey, there are lots of management companies out there. Why don't you go get projections from 3 different ones and show everyone how conservative you are across the board, right? It's tips like that you can't possibly know until you have experience or you have mentors. But to your point, with scaling anything that's growing fast, I'm sure you guys can relate to this. There will be trade-offs. And in the beginning of the investment company, I wanted to build a property management company also, right? So I wanted to self-manage all of our locations, have a brand, right? My last name is Starr. It was kind of an easy way to figure out how to brand these facilities. And what I learned is that property management is really hard. It's really hard. And what I decided to do was, instead of, build and focus on the operations side, I would focus on scaling, which is what I was really good at, which was how to find a good location, how to underwrite well, how to raise capital, and then make sure, how do we vet really good management companies for all these locations. So there were definitely some trade-offs in scaling, but learned how challenging property management can be and how important really, really good technology and really good systems is in that situation.
It's awesome. It seems like that also fits perfectly into moving into, acquiring and running a whole data platform. It kind of hits on all your skills that you kind of developed in your past life, and now combining that with being an operator, self-storage, it makes you the perfect candidate to run that, right? And when was the point, whenever, I guess maybe in your corporate experience, or maybe while you're running, what pain point did you finally struck? You're yeah, this industry needs a better data tool out there.
Yeah, I'll first say that this is my first time running a technology company, right? Maybe it's not for you guys, but I have amazing partners, Marina and Ethan and the rest of our team. So definitely could not do this without them. And there's been a lot of growing pains as a young leader that I've learned here. In terms of the pain points, real estate data holistically is one big pain. And at least our hypothesis is real estate today is mostly peripheral metrics, right? We know how many stores are in the area. We know what their website rates are. We know new developments coming into the area, but we don't know occupancy. We don't know achieve rates. We don't know really, like lengths of stay and, marketing spend. And we don't know a lot about the properties that we buy. And, so the larger groups, the really big groups, if you have a portfolio of dozens and dozens in that market, you could kind of already see some data that can give you additional competitive advantages. But this is the kind of data that I didn't have. And all of that culminates with inaccurate data, with data that's really expensive and just unattainable for the smaller and mid-size investment company. So that to me was a problem I really understood well. It didn't seem like there were many groups trying to solve it head on. So figured that we certainly could try.
I'm curious just to dig really quickly in, as somebody that's identified as a data scientist for a long time, somebody says messy data, my brain starts to go off on how to start to clean things and stuff. I'm curious, just to give a sense to everybody that's listening or potentially watching, what's that actually look like? What kind of data are you looking at? What's the format that you are kind of digging through? In my head, I'm got 30 different Excel documents open. They all have different column names. Some of the fields are mislabeled, et cetera. I'm just kind of curious, what did that look like while you were digging into the data and seeing that there was a data problem happening?
So I would say that that wasn't necessarily the problem that we faced, because it was more a problem of actually getting the data than actually manipulating it and organizing it, which is now what Tract IQ does at scale. But I'll give you an example. If you want to know new storage developments that are about to open in your market, except for a company like Tract IQ, the way to get that data is to call the county. Stay on hold. You ask, hey, what's coming into the market? And they'll tell you the address, and you'll ask, okay, when is it delivering? Who's the owner? How many square footage is it? What's the cost? All these things. And some cities will say, here you go. Other cities will say, I don't know, but call me back later when the other guy comes in, because I'm not the person who does that, right? So it was very much the pain of aggregating very simple, but yet highly valuable and necessary data. It wasn't even just about the spreadsheets. It was
It's
more
not even being collected.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's not even being collected anywhere, which is problem number uno, or even
And if it
problem
was
number
being
0.
collected, it was really expensive to get that data. And it just makes it so that, you can drop money, but even the accuracy isn't always great. You're trying to justify the ROI spend to your investors. And it's really hard to try to pay for something that expensive if it's not always right.
Appreciate that. That's awesome to paint a little bit of a picture there.
For sure.
I think that you make a good point here. It's so hard to get this data, which makes it unattainable to the majority of the market, even to do anything with that data, right? So let's talk a little bit about, the point of, I feel like a lot of the people in the audience would like to hear how you guys think about helping operators differentiate from the larger players, which have access to a lot of this data. They have full-on teams internally accessing this data, cleaning this data, using predictive analytics to figure things out. And so can you talk about a little bit about, maybe what REITs get wrong that maybe a smaller player, an independent player can get right whenever we talk about data? What are some advantages or disadvantages, et cetera?
Yeah, I'll caveat this and say that we work with Public Storage and we work closely with a lot of the larger groups, but I think they won't mind my critiques here at all. So what I would say is, if you are a management company and you want to win a site and you're competing with the REITs will provide a projection analysis, but they generally tend to use their reputation as justification for not sharing more, right? So they'll give you a projection analysis, maybe they'll give you some comps, and then a lot of the communication, it seems to me, is trust us. We know what we're doing. We're the biggest. I think a way to differentiate yourself if you were trying to compete with these groups is to be the transparent partner and do your due diligence in a way that is thoughtful. It's backed by really good data, but kind of guide your client or prospective client into trusting you, meaning, hey, Noah, or hey, Rodolfo, we manage 6 locations in Austin. Okay, I can't show you everything that's going on with those locations, but I can show you a little bit of information of what we're achieving in this market as to justification for why we think we can do this for your store. And just that, it's kind of the concept of if you're vulnerable with someone, they'll be vulnerable back with you. I think there's a huge opportunity to really demonstrate your trust and your commitment to the potential client, because people can see Rodolfo or Mason's really sending us data that we don't have. They don't have to do this, right? But I think it'll make you come across as a true partner. And that to me is everything when you're dealing with the REITs.
I love digging into kind of like the day-to-day. I'm kind of curious, like if we could go through, so you've gone from asset collector as an investor buying a portfolio of self-storage assets, into the software game. Like, well, can you maybe like walk us through a favorite success story that you've had since you've taken over Tract IQ? Like, who's that customer? In the startup world, like 5 to 10 years ago, we'd have like the startup explainer videos and they were all exactly the same. I was like, hey, meet Mason. He's got this problem. You know what I'm talking about? And so like, I'm curious, like to walk through, like if we were to go, what's that favorite customer success story that you guys continually like lean on to, maybe in a non-obvious way, right? Like, hey, if somebody's using our platform to the fullest, this person is not only going to get the properties that they want, but also, some advantages in the market that they're playing in.
I'll give you the obvious way and then the non-obvious way. So for the obvious way, we work with a number of management companies. And just for reference, we track over 70,000 storage facilities across the United States. We're the official data provider for the Self-Storage Almanac, and we help investors, brokers, operators, and vendors find and analyze storage deals 10 times faster with really good data. So on the management side, we had a group who joined Tract IQ, and as part of that, we help build custom prospecting engines to actually reach out to owners the moment they actually will need management. So for instance, if you know that a property is about to break ground, or you know that they just started construction, that's a really good time to reach out to that owner because maybe they haven't figured out the management solution yet for that property. So we've had a handful of property management companies get successful using our data to actually win new business. That's like an obvious way of leveraging our data to find new deals. We've had brokers, and we even had one of our newest customers, first-time storage buyer, within 3 weeks of signing up to Tract IQ, he got his first deal under LOI, which was awesome. The non-obvious way is I was working with someone who was a teacher, and she wanted to buy her first self-storage facility. She actually wanted to develop a project out in Maryland, and we walked through it together, and I saw that a mile and a half away from her location, there was another development about to deliver into the market, another 100,000 square feet. Rents in that market were down 20% year over year. And I showed her this other development was coming into this market, and she backed out of the deal. Now it's hard, like that's a non-obvious win of like, oh, how much money I made with Tract IQ. There is nothing more expensive than a bad deal. And I can attest to that. In real estate and in life holistically, getting into bad situations is really expensive emotionally, physically, and financially. And I would consider that scenario potentially more important than the ones of folks actually just finding really good deals too.
That's such a good example. And to your point, like a non-obvious thing is like the data to tell you no, right? I want to kind of put a little bit of a spin on a question here. Like, again, kind of going back to data, I think it's like really easy for people to draw conclusions based off of like misunderstanding context of data, right? Like we see it all the time in the mass media where numbers are just, you take a number and you make that number whatever story you want it to fit the narrative that you're trying to tell. So I'm curious, like, what's a dangerously like wrong conclusion someone has or could draw using Tract IQ's data that like they might do just because they misunderstand the context that surrounds that data point?
It's a great question. And your point, 60% of headlines are all wrong. right?
Yeah,
Which is a
exactly.
headline,
Let's
which is
let's pick a
big.
number and make a point from it
Yeah,
to just hit home the point anyway.
exactly. And I think I would say it goes back to the point I made earlier about real estate data today does not necessarily paint the full context of a given market. So you look at storage holistically over the last 3 years. Street rates have come down significantly. Web rates have come down significantly. And the discount rate between the street and web hit its peak, last year and is still really, really elevated. You look at that in the context of a news headline and you say, oh my gosh, storage is falling from the skies. If you actually looked at achieved rents from the REITs, they actually kept growing achieved rents until it kind of stabilized in Q4 of last year, even throughout this whole situation with street rates being declined. And the reason for that is because of existing customer rent increases. It's because of really good revenue management software and really good technology that's allowed really smart operators to maximize their sites. I, of course, point out the problems with this strategy in the industry holistically. And, our company goal is to make real estate data and self-storage data more transparent so that consumers and investors and operators are, more aligned. But I think there's a ton of context in self-storage that you can't always see from just some of the headline street rent or web rate prices.
Just to reiterate, we almost hang our hat on that too often, right? That's the one number that we're all talking about is the street rate for a 10 by 10 is either going up or going down. And maybe it's occupancy as well too, but maybe sometimes there's context around those numbers that gives meaningful background to why something is happening that we need to be paying more attention to.
Yeah. And it became a strategy of there were lots of storage facilities that NOI has never been higher year over year over the last 3 years. And yes, their cap rates are different. Their valuations might still be lower, things like that. But really understanding the full context of the industry, whether it's why demand is down, whether it's new supply that has had a development lag and there's too much supply flooding the markets, or housing market being stuck at a standstill because everyone's stuck with a 3 or 4% interest rate, and to get a 7 or 8% interest rate today doesn't make sense for a lot of people, right? All of these factors culminate into really a huge contextual narrative around self-storage, and each market is different, right? If you're in Los Angeles or Knoxville, Tennessee, or Ohio, you could have conceptually very similar challenges, but each hyperlocal market can be very, very different.
Nice. I'm curious, we're talking a little bit nerdy numbers and stuff like that. So I might as well just hit one more of these questions before we kind of transition into tech and the future that we see kind of building technology platforms for operators. But I'm curious if there's a single market signal that Noah trusts more than the national economic headlines, or is there a number that you use as a North Star every single day?
When you number in terms of United States economic health, or are you talking about self-storage? Or
Yeah,
both?
I'd go with both, but let's use the self-storage industry specifically. What's the indicator that you're using for health of the industry?
It's a great question, and I would have to think about it. Overall health of the industry, I wouldn't say I have one metric I hang my hat on today, because every property that I look at and our clients look at, very much I beat the drum of there is not one metric that you can hang your hat on. Because supply per capita is low does not mean it's a good deal. Because the cap rate is high on the in place does not mean it's a good deal if the owner has a 10% expense load through the property. So there's so many things that factor into self-storage. And I'll even say there's different kinds of self-storage, right? So you have operators, right? What's good for the operator and what's good for the owner could be very different than what's good for the consumer and what's good for the investor, and even what's good for the vendor, right? So general contractors, if development's down, that's not great for them. But if development's down, then potentially investors and operators could be happy because there's less supply. So I would have to think about one health metric, and maybe it's something we can build together, but I don't think I have one just off the bat.
I love it. There's 2 podcasts that we've had. We're okay, we're going to go build a product off of the discussion that we're having live in here. And we're going to just call this the self-storage health metric. We'll probably come up with a better product marketing name than that, but let's go. And I appreciate the nuance of the response as well too. At the end of the day, to to continue to go down that. It's like, depending on who you're talking to and their role in the market, and there's various numbers that they should be looking at, and data is always complex, and you want to have multiple multiple data points in order to draw some type of a conclusion. So I appreciate the nuance of that in general. To kind of shift to technology a little bit, I'm curious, like, where do you think we are today? How do you think we're going to continue? Like, how many operators are utilizing Tract IQ today? How many of them, like where's that going to go? And like, how do we see that changing over the course of, like, let's time box it into the next 3 years?
Yeah, and you guys are an AI company, so of course you have a lot of experience with this. But I would say our thesis a year ago, to me, is certainly playing out, which is the cost of data holistically is coming down. And we're, I think, part of that reason in a positive way. So there's a large percentage of the market is leveraging our data in terms of setting rental rates, in terms of new acquisitions, in terms of finding deals, staying away from bad ones. Very large contingent of the industry. I think over time, I would expect that to rise significantly because the cost of data is coming down, the quality of the data is going up, and the types of technology that can leverage this data, whether it's through LLMs or through a swivel or through, all these other new technology companies. I mean, you're seeing the cost to develop technology come down. And all of this, to me, is positive for the consumer, not just the operator, where, it's great for the operator because you can run more lean, more efficiently, and potentially charge lower prices to make the same yield. Well, if you're providing a better experience at lower prices, that's also beneficial for the consumer. So I'm very optimistic that we've already seen a massive amount of investment and new technology disruption in self-storage. I only expect that to continue to increase in the next 3 years.
Are there
How do you
any?
guys see it?
I was curious to see, like, are there any, like, of those trends, technology, like, you guys are a data platform. Is there anything that you guys are maybe not necessarily hanging your head on, but you're really excited to either implement at Tract IQ or are really bullish about that's going to impact the industry in the next 5 years?
Yes, I would say there's a lot privately and then there's a lot publicly that I would say about what I'm excited about. I think the obvious ones are, you think of Cursor, you think of these LLMs to help you move so much faster on the development side. It's, I think, caused an interesting problem where I imagine your product roadmap 2 years ago versus your product roadmap today, maybe it's 2x more that you can do. I don't know what the math is for you guys, but just that speed matched with quality, I think has caused this acceleration. And I don't know if you guys have seen a lot of these no-code tools to empower developers or designers with Figma and things like that. There's just so much that's happening to make groups like yours and groups like ours run leaner, but run faster and better all simultaneously. It's a really interesting moment in technology. And especially on the data side, the AI is only as good as the data. That's really why we focus mostly on data quality and trying to figure out ways to get the most accurate data through new technologies and our team.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, because, like, whenever I'm picturing you and even the question you asked, it's like, well, with a lot of the new features coming out with, like, deep research or the agentic features, right, where now you can have it go deep into certain things and scrape information and whatnot. Was curious how that was, like, impacting some of y'all's just work and output. I feel like it could help tremendously. Obviously, in the you just hit the nail on the head. You guys are focused on also, like, the data quality, which I think is a very important aspect of that, because even if you're using some of those LLMs to help with some research and whatnot, you still need to kind of go through that quality reassurance, ensure that everything is up to par.
Have you guys seen this internally? Like, how does the backlog in your roadmap compare today versus 2 years ago? Like, how much faster are you guys moving because of all this?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a hot take that I think that most people that say that they're moving drastically faster or they're doing more with less heads is complete bullcrap, because I don't believe that. I mean, if you are doing it, you're setting yourself up for a lot of failures in the near term or midterm, because in my experience, having, very senior level engineers looking at the code, that code is not meant to scale. And so on the surface level, it's a really good parlor trick. But then when you start to actually think about a product that's going to do more than the new term that even like Sam Altman is utilizing, right, is they compare it to the fast fashion. It's like fast software, right? Something, and in fast fashion, it's meant to be used once or twice and then thrown away, right? And I think right now we're at the stage where we're seeing that with fast code, where like it's good to get an MVP out there. It's good to get an idea so that you can have a functional prototype. But I think when it actually comes to building a product that like people can utilize and rely on, we're not there yet. And we're still probably somewhere closer to 3 to 5 years away from like actually replacing a junior to senior level engineer from that perspective. Now, from a back end perspective, I think it helps with a lot of the data quality problems, right? Like it allows for you to rapidly iterate. It allows for you to replace like a lot of the manual tasks that I've been doing for 7 to 8 years, which is like literally, as I kind of described earlier, 35 spreadsheets, all properly labeled, and I'm having to organize them and like go through them manually. Like it speeds that process up today, but it's still not perfect, right? Again, another kind of like hot take, or not even hot take, but I think like understanding what's happening underneath the hood of a lot of these systems, that dirty work still has to happen. It just is happening a little quicker. It's happening a little bit more efficiently. But like, if you guys are dealing with mass data, you're going to run it through an LLM. It's going to do, or some type of a platform to try to organize, clean the data set, but you're still going to need to have a human go in and make sure that this thing is completely done. And you're writing not even AI-based tools, right? You're writing tools. We like to just throw around the buzz terms today, but you're writing tooling to like clean up data sets and structure data. Like an interesting problem that we deal with all the time, right, is normalization of phone numbers. But like I could sit here and say, we wrote an AI platform where we're using AI in order to normalize phone numbers, where at the end of the day, like the tech that we're using to normalize phone numbers is the same tech today as it was 10 years ago. We've wrote a really complex platform or function that takes in phone numbers, understands what's missing, strips out parentheses and dashes, and puts it into a database so that it's all normalized and ready to go depending on, what output we want to. All that to say, like, we are better at product planning because of AI. I think it is really good as a teammate for, if you take Kyle and I, who are very product focused on our organization, it can sit here and play a third person and do a lot of the legwork that we used to have to take, another 10, 15, 20 hours to go do. It's doing instantaneously for us, writing PRDs, helping us scope products so that we can communicate better with our engineering team, et cetera. And so it is speeding up the product cycle. I just think the adage that like we're writing code using Claude or Gemini or Cursor that's going into production, I think if you're doing that and you're doing it without having like your senior level engineers basically look at every single line of code, you're going to be setting yourself up for a really big technical problem in the near to short term.
Yeah, I wish Ethan was joined with me here. He's our chief product officer. I would say where I agree with you holistically is around the hype train. And, we don't use the word AI in Tract IQ today. And not that I'm against anyone who does, but I think it's never been easier to build stuff. It's still really hard to have focus around a specific pain point that customers have every single day, and building something that's durable and sustainable, to your point, that they can rely on. And that's what we're hyper focused on. And you can imagine, right? Imagine how many people have asked me when you're going to integrate an LLM into Tract IQ. You have to imagine how many people have asked me to do that.
Yeah.
And what I consistently will say is that is only as good as the data. We need to stay really, really focused on the data quality. And our customers are not asking for that because they take our data today and plug it into ChatGPT. What value are we really providing there? And we can be focused on other things. So I completely agree with you that it's never been easier to build things. It's never been easier to look like you are succeeding and look like you have amazing UI and a really, really cool use case. But it's really the unsexy problems that customers have, and you guys are doing it really, really well. We need to stay hyper focused on that because everything else, it's really easy to get distracted in today's world.
Yeah, spot on. I just think it's, we've had conversations all the time internally. I'm always testing, different things. And I do think that there are a lot of, like, from a product perspective, there are a lot of ways to speed up things. Like Again, Kyle and I were just having a conversation the other day around using Claude to help onboard engineers, right? So like, how do we get an engineer into a very complex system in a way that's quicker than what we used to do last, right? So you're using it almost as like a guide for the engineering platform. How do you use it for documentation purposes, right? Like these are things that are like real value that speed up the product roadmap, that allow for you to innovate a lot quicker. But at the end of the day, the problems that existed yesterday around building a really reliable product, to use a word that you used a second ago, and that solves customer problems, like I don't know that that's drastically changed just yet. And companies like Meta and Amazon, and I can't believe I just used Meta and not Facebook. Man, pinch myself a little bit. And Google, I think they like to externally communicate that they are doing those things, because that's what the public market wants to hear. That's what as a public company, they need to tell their investors that they're doing 10x with 10 less. But having a lot of people on the inside of these big businesses, I think that is really a story that's being told. Yes, maybe they are not hiring as many junior level engineers coming out of college, and they're using, Claude code to write unit testing, but they're not really replacing their senior level engineers. And in fact, Meta is, right now going out and spending sports level athlete money to acquire the top minds to try to break through that kind of perception wall right this second.
So I love
Yeah.
history, and you look at the major innovations in society, going back to the steam engine and industrialization and things like that. There are certainly types of roles today that have changed in an enormous way and will change enormously down the road. And you think of writing a PRD or doing a lot of manual research on something, right?
For the audience that doesn't know, PRD is a product requirements document, just because we haven't said that out loud just yet. So it's a document that gets written prior to the product team, engineering team, like agreeing to scope before you go build something.
Thank you for that. And yes, we're nerding out, but I would say, I think it increases the capacity for great work across the world for everyone. And folks that were doing some really manual tasks, like you mentioned the 10 or 15 hours a week that you would have to spend doing, some really manual tasks. In theory, this now frees you up to focus your energies on really, really, whether it's great strategy or it's talking to customers or it's thinking of other ways that you can add value into the ecosystem. I think that we have a huge opportunity to do much better work instead of being dragged down by work that isn't the most fun holistically. Lots of changes that are taking place, and it's crazy that we're living through this period of history where I don't think anything's moved this fast before, but it's cool to see it from the sidelines and actually do it simultaneously.
Yeah, I mean, to put the nail in the coffin, it's a fun time to be a builder right now because of the tools that you have at your disposal. And if you have a superpower, all four of us on here have some type of a superpower. It's why we are co-founders and founders of businesses. It's a magnifying tool, right? It magnifies that superpower so that you can continue to do it. And it's like that's an amazing thing to have. So yeah, I don't need to continue but nail on coffin. It's a really fun time to be a builder. It's a really fun industry to be in because I think there's a lot of problems to go solve. Over the course of like the last 2.5 years, we've seen a lot of software vendors coming into the space, and it's like, man, that is such a good thing for all of us involved. And hopefully, I said this on a podcast recently, hopefully there's a lot of collaboration too between software vendors because, and I know we've talked to Tract IQ about like how do we figure out ways to collaborate together and where do our product roadmaps come together? Because when we start to think about those things, operators and the industry as a whole are going to just mature and have so many amazing tool sets at their, in their tool belt to go build the self-storage facilities of the future. And that's a really exciting place to be, that we're getting to go do that in an industry that desperately needs us right now.
I love it. Well, I'll conclude that by saying we fear what we don't understand. And I'm a big science fiction reader as well. But I can say once you see the potential of how technology in this case can help you manage your facilities better, help you focus on the work that you find meaning in, fulfillment in, and doing your best work, think there's such an opportunity to participate in this and work with, the industry is so partnership oriented and, collaborative, where there's so many great things that we can all build. And it's really exciting to do it alongside you guys.
For sure. We can sit here and nerd out and keep going down the rabbit hole all day, but I'm curious, like, before we kind of do a rapid fire to close us out, Noah, as a thought leader, somebody that's pushing, I'm curious how you think about the difference between leadership externally, and then even more importantly, something that I'd love to understand from you is like, how do you think about leadership internally to your team, right? I don't know if you guys are remote or not. I think about that all the time where, I'm always out praising and putting a message to the external market. And then I have to turn around, and not most of our team doesn't get to see that. Right. And so how do you continue to make sure that your team members see that you're out taking action, knowing that they can trust in the vision that you have, et cetera?
Yeah, I think it comes down to, we have our company values, and I'm sure you guys do as well, but transparency is the biggest company value that we have in Tract IQ, and that feeds into a sense of empowerment. So there's obviously a lot of external leadership, whether, I'm coming on podcasts, or we're releasing research for the Self-Storage Almanac, or we're partnering with companies and trying to educate people on what's going on in the industry. But then internally, right, making sure people are empowered, they're working on things that they think have meaning, that are in their core competencies, and giving praise and recognition and aligning incentives. All those things culminate, and we're a remote company and, mostly based in Austin. So we get together, pretty frequently, but we're still technically remote. And, the kinds of people that fit that culture, right? We have to let them run. We have to let them fly. We can't have a situation where, me or our team is micromanaging anyone, right? Like, so we want to cultivate a culture where everyone has a clear set of goals and priorities. They feel like they have meaning and fulfillment in the tasks and the goals that they have, and just let them run and trust that they're going to do great work. And you'll have mistakes, but holistically, if you're transparent with each other, you're honest with each other, and, you admit your mistakes, it can create a collaborative environment where everyone's just doing really great work. And so long as you're in a shared purpose. So I also love to think of leaders in history and try to emulate them. And I try to think of people that I've worked with who I didn't like working for, right? And thinking of things that I would do differently. And, some of my heroes being Teddy Roosevelt or Warren Buffett, or, some others, and even some other folks like Steve Jobs. And, they all have their quirks and pros and cons, right? So trying to put myself in the shoes of the great folks and the great leaders, and, learn that I'm not perfect. I'm still young. This is my first life too. And so long as you're transparent with each other, you'll be able to create something cool.
Well said, man. That's awesome. And you also mentioned Steve Jobs. So I'm going to take the mic before Mason jumps in. But I did have one thing before. I was considering, I don't know if this is a quick fire or not, but just to wrap everything up on the tech side, data and everything you've been doing so far, like in the near future, or not so far away future, when everyone has access to the same data sets, or more sophisticated technology that can get them access to the same data sets, what do you think is going to truly differentiate an operator? Like, do you think better access to data is actually going to create a moat for an independent operator? Or do you think it just levels kind of the playing field and it's all about really execution and operation side of things?
I'll say first that I just reread Walter Isaacson's Steve Jobs a couple weeks ago for the second time. So that's why he was on my mind. And there's a lot to say there. We can talk offline. I think there's a long way to go, like a really long way to go in that scenario. And I think smaller and mid-sized operators are at such a disadvantage holistically, that in that world where data is ubiquitous, there is no competitive advantage in data. And we all have the same AI algorithms that run the same revenue management and the same customer experience and the same, if it's really a commodity, right? If we just accept that that's true, which will take years and a lot of time, it comes back to relationships. Because to me, in this era of AI, where everyone can do things, not everyone can be super personable and caring and empathetic and trustworthy. And I think that sets you apart today, and it'll certainly set you apart down the road, because, you guys, like, you want to work with people you like. You want to work with people you trust. And just because my AI sends you a fancy email does not mean that you'll want to work with me. You'll want to work with me because I'll tell you the truth. I'll, be honest with you, and we're going to have a good time together. Right. So I think that will never go away so long as humans run this world. And in a dystopian future, if that's not the case, then I think we can talk about something totally different.
Love it. Now going back to, you just read a book. I had a quick fire. Is there a framework or book you find yourself coming back to often?
There's a lot of books that I go back to often. I think on the technology side, I've reread that Steve Jobs book by Walter Isaacson a handful of times. I love rereading Warren Buffett and American Capitalist by Roger Lowenstein. I've read that like 4 times. And another one would be How to Win Friends and Influence People, in terms of
Classic.
how to communicate with people, how to have empathy, and how to lead folks. Those are some top ones that I've frequented over the years. What about you guys?
I'm scared to say
am I
that
missing?
I still haven't read the Steve Jobs book, so sorry, not sorry.
I'm gonna give you a better Steve Jobs book than the Walter Isaacson one.
Okay,
That's okay.
Ooh, send it to me too.
Yeah, I love Steve's stories, but I think sometimes we tell the wrong stories, which is fine. I think Walter, he's an amazing author, and he rushed the book out because of Steve passing, and that that kind of sucks that he had to take a little bit of a different thing out of Walter's books. Code Breakers, Jennifer Doudna is amazing. And then the Da Vinci book, I think, is really good, as well as the Ben Franklin one. He does a really good job on all 3 of those biographies.
You didn't
For me,
mention the Elon one.
again, in a similar vein to the Steve Jobs one, I
Agreed.
think he got pushed to publish something, and whether that was the acquisition of Twitter or just Elon's team or his publishers, I don't know exactly what the actual pressure was. I just wish that he's such a historian, and I think that he became known at, I mean, he obviously writes about the disruptors in history, and I think for whatever reason those 2 books specifically were just he didn't take the time and the care that he had done in previous books. And the Jennifer Doudna one came out between those 2 and was just absolutely fantastic. And I don't think that it was timely because it was right around the COVID time. And there's a lot of things in that one around the COVID vaccines being created based off of the mRNA, chain cuttings, kind of way above my head, but it was really good. Anyways, again, nerding out a little bit. I think a book that I go to, I love the Lean Startup just in general from a core concept. I think there's just a lot of concepts in the Lean Startup that go right. I have a background in Lean Six Sigma, and so the idea of lean processes is something that's always identified with me. And then the follow-up for Eric Ries called The Startup Way, which is a take on the Toyota way, which is obviously lean processing, etc., is a lot more action oriented, whereas the Lean Startup is very theoretical. The Startup Way is very how to go and operate this playbook. I think those are Bibles for me in my early entrepreneur career. The last one, and I go to, is completely outside of the startup world, but I think it's something that as a leader I continue to go to, and it's a book by famous surgeon Tuol Gwande. The book is called Being Mortal. His more famous book is Checklist Manifesto, which is amazing, but Being Mortal just reminds us that each of us have quality of life as humans is measured in multiple ways. And obviously he's a surgeon, so he talks about how our healthcare system sometimes gets that wrong, but I think it's a really good place to just kind of ground ourselves, realize that we do eventually have an expiration date, and we should really be thinking about quality of life and making life choices that increase that quality of life throughout it. So those are some of the ones that I think I lean on to pretty regularly.
I think for me, I like a lot of human behavior psychology, so that's what I enjoy reading. I do like my biographies, but Influence, classic. Robert Cialdini, one that I did enjoy. I feel like Kyle probably either recommended or I can't remember, but The Messy Middle by Scott Belsky.
Dude, that one's so good. That's so good.
Yeah, I still have it. I just love that book too. Just having it in my bookcase too.
Have you read Daniel Kahneman's stuff, Undoing Project or Thinking Fast and Slow?
Yeah, that one's Thinking Fast and Slow is I mean, that's a classic. It's definitely thick. But yeah, stuff like that. I loved it. Reading Range, that's another good one.
I need to pick that one up. That sounds like something I'd love. Awesome. To get back on, I'm going to ask a couple of rapid fires that I like to do at the end. One of my favorite ones to start with. We're going to all be in Austin probably in October. Favorite coffee shop in the city that we need to go to?
Favorite coffee shop in the city to go to? I would go to Flitch on the east side. It's like it was a renovated warehouse facility, and they put like a coffee and breakfast taco, 2 food trucks right outside, and they made it really nice. But that's a pretty cool coffee shop.
Nice. How do you take your coffee?
I'll probably do a cappuccino with oat milk and vanilla.
Dude, that sounds delish. Are you a morning person, night owl?
Morning person.
How many hours of sleep do you average on a night?
6 to 8.
All right, there you go.
I wish I was sleeping better. Ethan has the Whoop, and I might need to get one to track my health better.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm not going to diatribe on sleep, but that was the first time I've ever asked that because it's something that I'm like, as we interview more entrepreneurs, I'm just like curious to see where that is because I think society tells us entrepreneurs only sleep 4 hours. And I'm like, dude, I need like 8.5, 9, like on a really good night. So
Agreed.
last one I got for you before I pass it over to Rodolfo. A small purchase, around or under $100 that, you'd recommend to people because it's changed the way you do your life.
Small purchase under $100. I would say a notebook and a pen. And this is branded, right? So much stuff on weekends, and my best ideas and best thoughts come when I go off the grid. I try to go off the grid twice a month, which is my phone is off for 24 hours. I take this and a book, and it has definitely, I would not have Tract IQ if I wasn't a journaler like this.
That's awesome. Is that something that you camp somewhere, like, that being a new place, or do you like to be like people watching, kind of like in the middle of it all, just soaking it in and letting your thoughts just run wild?
Try not to put pressure on myself as to where, right? It's really just about being off technology and allowing myself to think, whether that's at a park or at my house or, at a coffee shop. It doesn't really matter so long as, I'm not a cyborg for a solid day.
That's awesome. Cool, man. Well, hey, this has been a solid conversation. A lot of good nuggets. I'm really, really grateful and excited that you're able to join and have a conversation with us. Last question is, like, where can people find you and keep up to date with what you guys have going on?
Yeah, you can follow me on LinkedIn. I'm posting a lot of data and stuff constantly. And then you can check us out at Tract IQ. We're coming out with a lot of really cool stuff. Really looking forward to seeing the 3 of you guys and excited for what you guys are building. And I'm sure we'll work together in some capacity very, very soon.
I appreciate it, Noah. Thanks for coming in and nerding out with us, dude.
I love it. I appreciate you guys.
Peace.